Hello everyone, Storm11 here. Today we'll be watching closely of a storm system that will be rolling through the western U.S. and eventually a surface low will develop in the northeastern part of Colorado. It will deepen as it continues to move in the northern plains and the upper Midwest, and it can bring a severe weather setup over portions of the central U.S. as well. And that does come along with a strong cold front, and you may see a couple strong storm setups over the next couple days after that as well later this week. Before we get started this video, if you guys like weather related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do this stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we'll have more updates on this topic here as well over the next couple days. So definitely stay tuned for more updates as well. We're going to get started with the watch warning advisory display. And we do have some freeze warnings and frost advisories over portions of the mid-Atlantic, even the portions of the Ohio Valley as well. A couple of chilly, cold nights over some of those areas. And I remember having a comment yesterday on the last video talking about how a lot of stuff is not normal. In reality, it is. If I'm correct in Kentucky, um, our average last frost to freeze is in late April. So, I mean, this is something you typically see in April. Sometimes you can get a winter storm like we just experienced in the interior northeast, as well bring in quite a bit of snow over some of those areas as well. So this is something you can typically see in late April. Get these big warm-ups, but you also get these big cool downs as well. So it is normal overall. Meanwhile, in the western U.S., got a mix of some wind and fire weather issues out there as well. Meanwhile, most of the central U.S. is quiet. The storm prediction outlook for today: marginal risk over portions of northwestern Texas and southwestern Oklahoma. At least some areas will be getting some rain. They could definitely use some rain. No tornado threat, but there could be that risk for some damage winds and hail as well. Tomorrow, there's a slight risk for severe weather in northeastern Oklahoma, southeastern Kansas, and southwestern Missouri. There is a low in tornado risk that may get upgraded to a 5% tornado risk on the next update, which I think it's going to be here in a little bit. Damage winds and hail are going to be the main threats out there. That's looking to be a pretty decent severe weather setup for some of those areas as well. Day 3, which is Thursday, we got a marginal risk over northwestern Oklahoma, most of Kansas, southeastern Nebraska, and northwestern northwestern Missouri, I should say. Then on day 4, which is Friday, 15% slight risk for southeastern South Dakota, central Nebraska, back into western Kansas. They did shift the slight risk a little bit further back to the west. System did trade a little bit slower, and sometimes that's very typical to see that, where some of the models do trend a little bit slower. So the severe weather setup looks to focus a little bit more further to the west. And on day 5, 6, and 7, it's currently predictably too low at this time. So let's begin on the severe weather setup on Wednesday in northeastern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas. Starting off with the HERM model, we're going to see a couple of thunderstorms that could try to develop somewhere in southeastern Kansas. These will be moving to the southeast. You do notice that's a pretty healthy storm shown by the HERM model in the evening hours on Wednesday. And that could contain large hail, damage winds, and there's also that risk for maybe an isolated tornado or two as well. But it doesn't take too much longer before it kind of fizzles out. A couple more storms may try to form behind that, but it doesn't look like they may not be that successful by the overnight hours at that point as well. So if the HERM model is correct when it comes to reflectivity, it's mostly an isolated to scatter type of event. I don't really expect an enhanced risk for the moment, unless if it trends to be a little bit more numerous, maybe an enhanced risk. But if it stays more isolated to scattered, I think they're going to maintain the slight risk out there. But if you do check out the significant tornado parameters, there are some decent numbers out there, especially in the northeastern part of Oklahoma. If we do get a sounding out there in the northeastern part of Oklahoma, you can see here there is a weak cap in the lower levels, especially if you get further back to the southwest. But even with a weaker cap there, I think still some storms may be able to blow through that cap because there is a decent elevated mix layer in place here, and also some decent Mid-level average will help bring in some stronger updrafts. You do have wind direction of high, plenty of wind shear, plenty of instability, as well. Downdraft cape is also pretty elevated. You also got a good hodograph as well. And if this turns out to be correct, conditions can be favorable for damaged winds, large hail, and there's also that low end risk for tornadoes. There may be a strong tornado. We're gonna say that's a low end threat for now because there are some elevated wind shear values out there. Wind shear looks pretty good for tornadoes, and the possibility could be good enough maybe for a strong tornado. We'll see about that, of how the models train over the next couple of runs. But regardless, it's a pretty decent severe weather setup for areas of southeastern Kansas, northeastern Oklahoma, southwestern Missouri, and even into northwestern Arkansas as well. May see some of that action as well. So if you do live in these areas, definitely pay attention to the forecast for Wednesday. Could be a pretty interesting setup there, and it could be a sleeper setup as well for some folks as well. It's a small scale event, but it has the potential to be a pretty good event by itself as well, as most to predict a pretty good atmosphere for a pretty good severe winter event for those areas as well. So let's kind of move on past Wednesday. Not much will be going on Thursday, which this is Thursday here. There's a system that rolled through um, portions of the Great Lakes to the northeast, bringing in some showers. But look off to the west here. You got a big system that moves in into the western U.S., and that's going to be our next decent severe weather setup. As we do move into Friday here, Friday around peak time heating, you got a strong surface low in the northeastern part of Colorado, very strong southwesterly flow as well. However, there's not much in the way of shower thunderstorm development at this point here. Now, there is going to be plenty of instability in wind shear to work with, but there are a couple of limiting factors out there, which we'll look at a little bit more detail in that in a little bit. But you can see here how your low, it begins to weaken in the overnight hours on Friday here as it does continue to move off to the northeast. There could be a decent amount of snow on the backside of the slow here as well, especially over portions of Montana and Wyoming. Portions of Montana, you may be able to see a pretty decent snowfall event again. Even in portions of North Dakota, could see a winter storm out of that system. Um, as well. Not as bad as the last system. I will say that. It's not going to be as bad as the last system, but the potential is there. You guys could see another winter storm, but it won't be at a level as the last storm. The last storm was already a pretty historic event for some of those areas. The highest snowfall total for the last event was 47 inches. That's just a ridiculous amount of snow. But this system here, thankfully, won't bring nearly as much snow, which is the good news. So then you move on to peak time heating on Saturday. Maybe a risk for some strong storms from portions of Minnesota, Wisconsin, for Iowa, even back down into portions of Kansas as well. Still a pretty decent low here. Seems like the GFS wants to suggest a stronger low on this day here as well, which can help increase the severe weather threat just a little bit as well. Still got a pretty decent amount of snow on the backside of that system as well. But hey, in the eastern U.S., you know, with that southeast ridge in place, we stay warm and dry. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel here for us there. But unfortunately, it won't last too much longer because this strong cold front will be approaching, and it does have a pretty good cold air blast behind it as well. And it does get interesting as you get deeper into early next week. But let's first get a little bit more detail for Friday before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So, peak time, well, probably about afternoon hours on Friday. So, pretty decent superset composite numbers, but there's going to be a cap in place. And I'll show you guys that with a sounding in the southern part of South Dakota. And that cap will likely be around. And here's you get some problems here. Number one, of course, there's a cap in place. However, there's another issue on here. There's a lot of dry air in the mid levels. Now, there is a dew point of 60 at the surface, but in the upper levels, when the dew point and temperature line are further apart in the mid levels, that's an indication there is some dry air in the mid levels. That could help prevent some of that strong thunderstorm development. Now, if the models were to trend to having a little bit better moisture, this can lead to a better severe weather setup. At the same time, the cap could be a little bit weaker as well. But as you get more into the peak time heating time frame, now we're starting to see some pretty good numbers out there. But let's see, let's get a sounding in eastern Nebraska first. And we could check South Dakota again. So even though you got these good supercell composite numbers that could be favorable for supercells, but you still got that capping issue instead of that dry air. And in eastern Nebraska, it does have a little bit of a weaker cap here in place. Slightly weaker, but you still got some of that dry air in the mid levels as well. So that's definitely something to really monitor as well, because then again, that could help lower that risk for some thunderstorm development. There could be some thunderstorms out there, but they may have a hard time getting organized because of all that dry air in the mid levels between 700 and around 850 millibars. And it gets worse as you get up into portions of South Dakota where we do have some of those highest numbers. There's a lot of wind shear in this environment. But then again, you got that issue of dry air and a cap, which you will see it here in a moment here, whenever it loads anyway. Yeah, there you go. Here's your sounding right here. Then again, a pretty ridiculous amount of wind shear, right? There's a story to felicity value of 700. Also, check out your wind bars out here towards the surface. I mean, that's pretty crazy. But lots of dry air going on in lower levels and a very strong cap. Thunderstorms are not going to develop in this environment with something like that. I mean, that's just not going to happen there. So even though you got a lot of instability, strong wind shear, good lap rates, but you got dry air in the mid levels and a very strong cap. There is so this is looking to be one of those setups where it has high potential for a pretty good severe weather event that could lead to possibility for significant severe weather, but it's also got that possibility for a bust, which that could be showers and thunderstorms could not develop due to that dry air and that strong cap. Now, as we do get deeper into the overnight hours on Friday night, the focus is a little bit further to the south here, more in the southern portions of Nebraska in western Kansas, which if we get a sounding there along the Nebraska and Kansas border real quick, you can see here with that similar situation here when it comes to that dry air and that cap in place as well. So we do need to monitor the model trends, because if they trend towards a little bit better moisture content, around 700, 850 millibars, in a weaker cap, that increases confidence for a bigger severe weather event. So if models continue to trend like this, I think the SPC will maintain that slight risk for the time being. But if the models trend the other way, they get into better agreement and they show a little bit more better moisture out there in a weaker cap, we could potentially see an enhanced risk upgrade. But that's hard to tell for right now. So it is definitely something to watch very closely here. Now, we are still a couple days away, so there is still plenty of time for changes. But it's definitely something to really watch here over the next couple of days as well. And then you move on to Saturday here. Not the best numbers here when it comes to supercell composite numbers in portions of the upper Midwest. But there are also some decent numbers back in the portions of Oklahoma. We'll get a sounding out there real quick. And you can see here a little bit better moisture content as you get a little bit further to the south here, a little bit closer to the Gulf of Mexico. But you still got that little weak cap in place, which could cause some problems as well for thunderstorm development. But I still think with an environment like this, some thunderstorms may try to develop, and you may have a risk for strong, severe storms. But still a couple days away, it could still change as well. Here's the European model, which from the European model standpoint, it actually does show some thunderstorm development out there as well. So it may have a little bit better moisture content out there as well, which could lead to thunderstorm development that can help increase the severe weather risk. So there is a little bit of a model battle out there right now. We'll have to wait and see where models trend next with it. But then as you get into Saturday here, you see thunderstorms blowing up across portions of the Midwest, back into the Severn Plains as well. Strong severe storms may be possible with some of those. as well. You also notice here it's a little bit of a negative trough in there in place as well. So we may need to pay attention to the Midwest back into the Severed Plains for Saturday as well and see where models trend with that next. And Sunday doesn't really look to be much of a day at all. It does show some showers and thunderstorms back into portions of Oklahoma, but I do believe which your values will be a little bit too weak to get organized severe storms. But as you get a little bit deeper to early next week, things get a little bit interesting. So our strong cold front is still here, still just about stationary here, but a new low may try to develop along that front as well. And whenever that occurs in that warm sector, may be able to help enhance the severe weather potential. Still a week out for the time being. Still a week out, but the possibility is there, and then we may see some more severe weather early next week as well, if this does occur here. If we check out some of the other models, like the GFS, for example, GFS is much faster with it, has a low, pretty much faster than the European model, basically like a day earlier with the GFS model, but it still shows that low developing along the front as well. And if you check out the European ensembles, now it doesn't show much of a mean at all. However, there are a cluster of members that does show that possibly for a low developing along the front as well. So this is something else to monitor as well over the next several days, because if models trend towards a stronger low, because there is likely to be a southeast ridge in place here to bring in that moisture and instability. It all depends on kind of on the strength of the low, because that could help increase the severe weather potential for some of these areas here in the southeast for early next week. But for right now, it's pretty far out to get too specific on it, but the potential could be there. We may see a decent severe weather setup, maybe sometime early next week. But anyways, guys, that's all for guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit the like button. If you're new, like the channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. I answer you guys questions. And I see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.